Hello, my name is Simon Crowley. I'm an outdoor education teacher at Lakefield College School in Ontario. I'm going to explain a little bit about myself and my experience, as well as share a little story about some of the outdoor ed that I have done in the past. So prior to teaching here at Lakefield, I actually taught overseas in Aotearoa, New Zealand for the last about 2.5 years. And I was teaching at a college there called Aotea College, which is just north of Wellington, the capital city of New Zealand. And there, in that role, I was teaching a hybrid of health and physical education as well as outdoor education. And specifically, my specialty was teaching grade 11 outdoor ed at that school. And in New Zealand, they focus a lot around, the course was built around leadership and resilience and teaching outdoor skills, pushing students' comfort zones and taking calculated, educated, safe risks, while also learning about the cultural relevance of some of the activities that we were doing and tying it into Maori culture, which is the indigenous culture in New Zealand. So in that role, that encompassed quite a few things, but basically we structured the course around the Maori wellness model, which is called Te Whare Tapu Whā. And essentially what that is it's similar to the medicine wheel here in Canada in regards to it encompasses 5 different values that the Maori believe create a whole and well person. So somebody who is in full health, and it's kind of a holistic model of looking at the whole person rather than just individual components of well-being. So those 5 values were physical health, mental, emotional health, spiritual well-being, social well-being, relationships, and then finally your connection to the land and your roots and where you're from. So for the course, we focused on all of these different components of well-being in different ways, but at the end of the year we had to come up with a overnight trip that would be outdoors, obviously in nature, but also connect to this Te Whare Tapu Whā well-being model. And so we connected primarily to the roots and the land and where you're from portion for this overnight trip. So essentially what we came up with was to do a 3-night overnight bike tour, which involved, we had done a fair amount of mountain biking up to that point, and so we did this 3-night bike tour where we would leave from just outside of Wellington and do a circuit up through a series of mountains, back around the coastline by the ocean, and then come back in towards the main city again. And what was relevant about this, outside of the outdoor skills and the learning to camp and planning your own meals and planning the route, was it is also an area of cultural relevance to the Maori. So it used to be a popular trade route for the Maori to transport goods from one agricultural area on the eastern side of the mountains across the mountains over to the western area where the port city of Wellington was built up. And then following that, in the early 1900s, a railway had been constructed, and that railway had then been turned into this bike path. So essentially, we co-constructed this trip with our students, myself and the other outdoor education teacher. The students were responsible for also coming up with a cultural game that they were going to teach their peers once we got to camp that night as kind of the evening activity. And we had to be careful about this. Obviously, we didn't want it to be forced upon the students as a game where it was, appropriating Maori culture. But as a lot of our students were Maori and had that background, they knew a lot of these games already and were able to better speak to the history and the culture behind each of the games that they were leading. And so once we kind of came up with that plan, we took it to the students and we had them plan their own gear that they were going to be bringing, with obviously help and assistance from ourselves as teachers. And then they also helped co-construct the route a little bit. So we had a few different areas where they could have some student voice and some structure and some say over what we were going to be doing. They also planned their meals, like I mentioned, for the entire trip. And then following that, they planned out a game or an activity that they were going to lead for their peers. So the trip was a fantastic experience. We actually ended up running it twice with 2 different classes. So my own class and then another class, which I assisted on as well. It was an incredible experience because the students really got engaged with both the material of what they were teaching to their peers, because it had to tie to their own culture and their own way of life. So we had some students from Samoa, some students from Fiji, we had students that were Maori, indigenous to New Zealand, and then we also had European ethnic background students that brought a game from their culture. And taught that game to the students. So we had everything ranging from cricket being played to a game called Kiorahi. We had a game called Te Uru, which is, both of those are Maori games that were used to train rugby players and also warriors back in the early days. And It was an incredibly impactful experience. The students spoke about the history of the games, and then they also helped, obviously, with leading the trip. So there was a lot of leadership being demonstrated on the trip. But it was just great for me because I felt like we were able to identify so many different areas of the curriculum. By talking about the history of this trade route, we also spoke about the outdoor component of leadership and safety and taking healthy risks. And then we were also able to tie in that cultural aspect of having the students lead a game that was culturally relevant to them. So all in all, it was a great experience, and something that I would love to bring something similar to West Point Grey Academy if I were to be given this opportunity. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of kind of some of the things that I've done in the past, and also how I like to facilitate a trip or facilitate any big activity in the outdoors. Structured around, obviously, the students being of the utmost importance. They are placed at the center of it all, giving them a voice and giving them say to co-construct the activity with the teachers. Identifying the curriculum points that we want to hit. Safety is obviously a huge concern as well, so that was a lot of the background research that we did ahead of time to make sure that it was a safe trip. We had a truck with us at all times that was kind of meeting us at each checkpoint that we'd identified, so that would bring extra gear, extra first aid kits, extra water, food, all of that, and was also our emergency vehicle if we needed to make an evacuation. So yeah, so all in all, I think, like, based on the fact that we were able to identify so many points of the curriculum, we were able to execute this trip safely, and we were also able to give the students an amazing experience kind of in their own backyard, not too far from the city where they actually lived. So yeah, I was quite proud of the way that we were able to execute this trip. And I would love to be able to plan and operate something similar at West Point Grey Academy should I be given an opportunity with this department going forward. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video.